Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, July the 11th, 2025. Born on this date in 1897, former Birmingham Commissioner of Public Safety Bull Connor of Selma. And in 1975, former NFL Pro Bowler Willie Anderson of Mobile. Hey, we're going to talk about a new podcast coming from AL.com called American Shrapnel. It's all about the hunt to arrest 1996 Olympic Park bomber Eric Rudolph after he bombed a Birmingham abortion clinic. Columnist John Archibald and producer John Hammontree will join me. First, though, we're going to talk a little about Bruce Pearl and politics, Huntsville's growing city limits, and more details on the Amber Alert you may have received yesterday. My name's Ike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Well, something we haven't mentioned yet here, because it's been so far into that buzz and rumor territory, is the speculation around Auburn basketball coach Bruce Pearl and that U.S. Senate seat that former Auburn football coach Tommy Tuberville is leaving open. Pearl's frequent social media posting about his support of Israel has grown into voicing support for President Trump and or conservative issues. In fact, this off-season, you're more likely to see Pearl post about politics than basketball. Pearl himself has not indicated that he's interested in the Senate seat, but he hasn't seized an opportunity to slam the door shut on it either. He didn't respond to a request for comment from AL.com. He went on the podcast One Jewish State and was asked about it and said, quote, "There is no news to be made. And I care about these issues, but I love Auburn and I love being Auburn's basketball coach." Now, that's not exactly putting the topic to rest. AL.com columnist Roy S. Johnson spoke with Auburn basketball legend Charles Barkley about the scuttlebutt, and it's apparently come up between Pearl and Sir Charles. Barkley told Johnson, quote, "I respect and trust him. I just told him to do what he wants to do. Obviously, he's made Auburn basketball relevant, which makes me happy. I said, hey, man, as much as I love you being the head basketball coach at Auburn, you taking Auburn to 2 Final Fours, something I never thought would happen, but I do understand. If he wants to run, I'm going to support him 100%, end quote. Y'all remember years ago when Barkley was fresh out of the NBA and teased everybody by saying he was going to run for governor. It sounds like the Pearl thing is going to be a thing until Pearl is emphatic that it is nothing, or he files to run. Huntsville city limits now covers parts of 4 counties, reports AL.com's Scott Turner. On Thursday, the city approved the annexation of about 1,014 acres south of the Tennessee River in Morgan and Marshall counties. Of course, Huntsville's biggest area stretches across Madison and Limestone counties. According to City Manager of Planning and Zoning Services Thomas Nunez, there's only one single-family home on the land, and no more homes are planned. Whiz Kids LLC and the company that operates Smyrna Ready Mix Concrete petitioned Huntsville to annex the land. It allows the city to regulate Smyrna's quarry there. This also means that Huntsville has annexed more than 1,600 acres this year and is now the 37th largest city geographically in the nation. The Rocket City is roughly the size of Chicago and San Francisco. You may have received an Amber Alert on your phone Thursday afternoon. It was for 3-year-old Jabril Heron, who was missing out of Auburn, reports AL.com's Carol Robinson. He was found to be missing when police found the bodies of the child's mother, 34-year-old Taisha Williams, and 13-year-old Zinnia Wright, in their home in Auburn. Police are looking for Aaron Dante Williams, who's the husband of Williams and the father of young Jabril. They said he's not the father of the teenage girl. Williams has a criminal history and ties to the Huntsville area. Police said he would be driving a gray 2010 Honda Accord. He's a 6'1", 240-pound, 41-year-old black male and described by police as armed and dangerous. Crime Stoppers and the FBI are offering a $15,000 reward. If you have information, call 911 or the Auburn Police Department. And Governor Kay Ivey authorized flags to be flown at half-staff through the weekend, reports AL.com's Heather Gann. The order, which ends at sunrise Monday, is to honor the victims of last week's flooding in Texas Hill Country. Those victims include 8-year-old Sarah Marsh of Mountain Brook, who was one of 27 killed at Camp Mystic. Among the many who are still missing are Eddie Santana Sr. and his wife, Ileana of Mobile, and their granddaughter, 5-year-old Mila Rosa Santana. Hey, let's take a quick break, come back, and talk about a new podcast and the search for Eric Rudolph. Y'all stay with us.
Atlanta, 1996.
There is a bomb in Centennial Park. You have 30 minutes.
They'd only get 20.
The largest pipe bomb America had ever seen tore through a crowd at the Atlanta Olympic Games.
Then a Georgia abortion clinic.
Then a lesbian bar.
2 years, 3 bombs, no answer.
Until Birmingham, where he bombed another abortion clinic.
A cop dead, a nurse maimed.
And the blood was still on the wall. It never came off. Each year, pieces of his uniform would come up when it rained.
But finally, no witness.
He saw it all.
So began the largest manhunt in American history, the search for Eric Robert Rudolph.
He knew the area. He's like, this is where I can hide, and nobody's going to find me.
American Shrapnel is the story of a homegrown terrorist.
He's got very cold, dark eyes, and I don't think he was remorseful in the least.
He would either be famous or infamous. That he was either going to do something great or he was going to shock the hell out of everybody.
It's the story of victims and survivors, of heists and unlikely heroes, of sympathizers, and a part of America that embraces violence in the name of God.
I think there's no way he was not somehow assisted in his years on the run a little bit.
Of course, he had help. Someone should have gone after those people.
American Shrapnel, a new series from AL.com, is coming soon to your favorite podcast app.
I just think the son of a bitch was mean. I think he was evil. When he opened his eyes, you knew that there was no soul behind him. None.
Hey, folks, that's the trailer for American Shrapnel, a podcast by AL.com that's dropping July 30th. Thanks for staying with us. To give us an inside look at this podcast, we have back in the Down in Alabama studios, John Archibald and John Hammondtree. John Archibald is a Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and I believe former crime reporter. You can correct me, which would apply here.
You bet.
John Hammondtree is the head of podcasting for AL.com. Welcome aboard, guys.
Hey, it's good to be here. Love the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Like, always a pleasure.
Hey, I appreciate it. Guys, I just told you off the air, I'm excited about the podcast because I know a little about the case, but nowhere near what you know. And I also don't know anything about the production of this thing, so I'll be coming to it new. Um, I know that it involves the hunt for Olympic Park bomber Eric Rudolph. As a starting point, John Archibald, I got to say your last names. This case is a big point, comes from a big point in your career. Am I right?
Yeah, it was a huge part of my career, or at least in my memory, anyway. So I was on in 1998, so it's like 27 years ago now. So it's just crazy to think about. And this bomb
Gosh.
went off in downtown Birmingham, or south side of Birmingham, and that was the age of newspapers. So everybody mobilized, and that afternoon or the next morning, I was on my way to North Carolina to look for this guy, and Carol Robinson and Greg Garrison and Kent Falk. A lot of people work with us, Jeff Hansen, doing the same thing. And it was, it was wildly adventurous. It was the largest manhunt in American history at the time.
Mhm.
People don't remember that because it got kind of washed away in 9/11. But he was gone for a long time. And I thought I knew everything there was to know about it. But as Hammondtree will tell you, as long as many people as we talked to and as many records as we looked through, we learned stuff we had no idea about. And that's what's the cool part about this podcast.
Yeah, what surprised you the most? Now, well, actually, remind me when you got started on the case. An abortion clinic was bombed in Birmingham, but you didn't know yet that this was going to tie in with the Olympic Park bombing.
No. Sorry, John. I should let the other John talk. But
No,
it was really important.
This is all you.
Because, in 1996, the Olympic Games had soccer here, right? Atlanta was huge. The Olympic Games were coming to the South. And we had soccer games here in Legion Field, and it was cool. And I was covering, they had me covering soccer prelims with the Brazilian women's team, which was a great assignment, I will say. And
Mia Hamm, the year of Mia Hamm.
And it was so cool. And then the bomb went off in Atlanta, and it was like, oh man, it spoiled everything. But when it happened in Birmingham a couple of years later, nobody had any idea. They were related, and we'll talk a lot about how the bombs differed in those things. But the only way they solved the Olympic Park bombing and 2 other bombings in Atlanta was because of what happened in Birmingham that day. And that's and part of that, I don't know how much we're going to get into it, but the part of that's such a prize was the most illuminating thing to me. It's amazing. You got a young kid who's a hero that nobody even knows about. And it's a great story.
Well, tell us about the hero.
Hammondtree, take over.
Well,
first of all, did we load the Hammondtree app? I had to build an app during the process of the taping of this thing, in which you feed Hammondtree's words into the app, and it cuts out 4 out of every 5, and you end up with something brilliant.
I'll just say this. There was a student at UAB named Jermaine Hughes, and he was there in his dorm doing laundry, and he hears this bomb go off down the street. Looks out. He sees everybody running towards the bomb, running to help, except for one guy walking away. And he did something that most people probably wouldn't do. He followed that guy, and he followed him up past Vulcan. He followed him past where that McDonald's used to be. Growing up, I always heard, oh, that's McDonald's where they caught Eric Robert Rudolph, which is not the case. It was not the truth. That was something got lost in translation for that legend. But it was instrumental in helping catch him. He spotted him there. He had lost him there, actually. And a lawyer named Jeff Tickle, who's now a judge down in Auburn, Opelika region, he spotted him too, wrote down his license tag number on a McDonald's coffee cup, which is now in the Birmingham FBI archives. Mm-hmm. And, that might have saved hundreds of lives, dozens of lives. Who knows? They had no leads at that point. They didn't know who Eric Rudolph was, and he had stolen 200 pounds of dynamite. So we know that he had intended to commit more bombings, and he was getting frustrated that his bombings weren't as fatal as he wanted them to be. And so if not for Jermaine Hughes, who knows what might have happened.
Yeah,
And that story, we'll go into it a lot more depth in the podcast. But it's an amazing search. I mean, the guy's out there darting behind apartment complexes, changing his clothes, putting on wigs, and this kid is just like, well, this doesn't seem right. And he'd be asking people for help, and they're like, "What, are you crazy?" And so it ends up being really dramatic and told through old police tapes that nobody, as far as I know, nobody else has yet seen or heard. And I think it's really effective way of telling that story. We used to have a city editor named Randy Henderson, and you might know him, and may he rest in peace. But I mean, that day, they issued a bolo. We got the tag number, and it tracked down who it belonged to. And that afternoon, Randy Henderson said, "Go, go, go," and we were there for weeks. Me and Carol and Peggy Sanford, and but that manhunt was so huge. You just can't imagine it these days. I mean, dozens of satellite trucks and FBI, ATF. They had commandeered an armory, and in Murphy, North Carolina, and while the feds and the press were invading that town, the people, they were writing songs about "Run, Rudolph, Run" and selling coffee cups and that sort of thing. And it was just really sort of a wake-up call, I think, to the kind of disagreements we have in this country.
Well, at what point in this process, because I don't remember this, at what point did the Olympic Park bombing get tied in and we realize we're after the guy who committed multiple crimes?
You're asking for spoilers already, Ike? The podcast doesn't come out for 3 weeks. No.
I've got a podcast to think about here.
What's interesting is that the FBI, in reporting on this, and I should note that John's co-host and our colleague on this, Becca Andrews, is actually in North Carolina doing additional reporting on this right now. And we just got a text that she has a flat tire. So, we're putting our all into this series up until the last minute. But we love you, Becca. And, we couldn't have done this without her. But we came into possession of thousands of federal task force documents that detailed the investigation as it was happening. John got to hold in his hand, the beat reporter notebooks from 1998, from that time period. And what's fascinating is the public certainly didn't know that Eric Rudolph was responsible for all 4 bombings, but the Fed seemed to have a hunch. They were asking his family, they were asking his friends questions about the Olympic bombing within 24, 36 hours of the Birmingham bombing. And so they clearly saw a connection. They had lost a lot of time. People likely know the Richard Jewell story, the security guard who was wrongly accused, who was kind of dragged through the mud as having planted the bomb. He really was a hero, and they lost a lot of time, and some would say lost some credibility in that search process. But I think that they knew quickly, or at least they suspected quickly, that he might be involved with all 4 bombings.
Yeah. John Hammondtree, also tell me, in the whole process to plan this podcast, what kind of, is this something that's been in your back pocket for a few years? You've been thinking, we need to address this, or has anything in particular, what puts you on the trail?
Well, I've been fascinated by this story. Like I said, growing up hearing about that McDonald's that ended up being, inaccurate information, but it certainly led me to be curious about it. And then, of course, talking with John about it. But, a few years ago, with the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, and just the general spike we have seen in political violence in this country in the last few years, assassinations in Minneapolis, reporters being killed, the president being shot at twice, January 6th, of course. This seemed like an interesting time to look back at that period of the 90s where there was also a spike in political violence. You had Waco, you had Timothy McVeigh in Oklahoma City bombing, you had Ruby Ridge in the late 80s, early 90s, and then, of course, you have
World Trade Center.
World Trade Center bombing, and then you have the Atlanta bombings and this Birmingham bombing. And I think what's been interesting to me is to look at how all of those events are linked. You know, when Eric Rudolph wrote letters taunting the police and journalists about his bombings in Atlanta, he used the date of the final day of the Waco siege as his code there. He had the autobiography, or he had the biography of Timothy McVeigh on his bedside table in his trailer. There's a lot of similarities between the two of them. There's a heist that we go into in great detail in episode 4 that's well on the other side of the country that has connections to Rudolph. And so I think it's fascinating to look at that period of the 90s where you had all of this political violence, and then to see how it carries through to today. When Rudolph was being radicalized, he was having to, read pamphlets that were being sent to his mailbox in unmarked brown envelopes. Now you can get radicalized just by clicking on the wrong YouTube link. And so I think it's been very instructive to looking at this current moment and just radicalization in general.
And John, for you, it's probably a revisiting, the big story in your career, and an opportunity to kind of put a sort of a period on it, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's all Hammontree. I mean, Hammontree's good at getting people, especially me, to do stuff. And he talked about, it being a podcast 27 years in the making for me. And I think that's right. And I don't think I would have returned to it had not that. But man, I'm so glad I did, just because there's so much weird stuff I had no idea about, even though I was on the ground and thought I knew stuff. I mean, I had no idea what a great pot grower Eric Rudolph was. He apparently grew the best pot in Carolina there for a while, that he'd smuggled back in seeds back from Amsterdam, and he got, of course he did it on government land. So that was, just right in keeping, So, I mean, there's all sorts of tidbits, and the way his ex-sister-in-law talks about it is just gold. And some of the characters in this thing are amazing. A cop named James Blanton, who initially found, talked to Jermaine Hughes and issued the first bolo for Eric Rudolph. I mean, he's a character. And, we got, senators and state Supreme Court justices and 4 different U.S. attorneys, which I think is some kind of record, and cops and prosecutors and victims and survivors, and the array of people who are willing to talk about this. And, we never had, I mean, we had great coverage. I went back and looked at it. We had great coverage in 1998, but it was superficial because it was happening in the moment.
Yeah.
And there's so much you don't know in the moment that you can look back on in the context of it all and see things you never saw before. So thanks, John Hammontree, for hooking me in.
Well, it's always fun to work with you on these projects. But Ike, we should note, you have your own story about this as well. You had a literal stop the presses moment when this happened.
Well, that's more of, I guess, a personal thing. But yeah, I was a kid. I think I was about 2 years old, working in the newsroom, and in '96, and there's levity in this story, so y'all give me a little bit of room for that. But the news desk, I worked on the sports desk, and the news desk had been cutting out a little early on Friday evenings to go down to the Hole in the Wall Tavern, and not real early, but early enough, just before we did. How about that? And they left, and they said, "Hey, Ike, man, we're going down to the bar." So I said, well, and believe me if you want to, I said, well, what if something blows up? And it was, an hour later, 2 hour, whatever it was, the bomb goes off. And so there are about 4 of us left on the sports desk, and everyone took a job remaking the front page, of course. And my job, because I was the kid, and they didn't want me to mess anything up, so my job was to run downstairs and get them to stop the presses. And I'm like, so we do this in our business, but that's my little story.
So that's 1:00 in the morning.
I think so. We were Eastern time where I was working also, so it was very late. It might have been
So maybe
1:30.
1:30. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
1:30
Well,
Eastern.
I think what's interesting, we've just been starting to promote this thing, starting to push it out on social media, and everybody seems to have a story connected to at least one of those bombings. Everybody, remembers where they were with the Olympic bombing. I'm hearing from people who remember hearing the bombings in Birmingham. One guy reached out to me. We may have to talk to him, John, but his dad signed the federal warrant for Rudolph's arrest, and so it's a story that has somehow slipped through the cracks. It's not one that I think stays on the tip of people's tongue like Timothy McVeigh or the Unabomber, outside of Birmingham and outside of Atlanta. We've talked to a lot of people who have no idea that this story happened, but I think that it's that last chapter, and we're excited to tell it. And John and Becca just, bring their great storytelling styles and abilities, sometimes clashing, sometimes complimenting each other.
The creative process is a dangerous thing.
Yeah, we're if there's another fatality that Rudolph is responsible for, it'll be the two of them killing me by the end of this process. So his death toll may climb, but it's been fun to work on, and I think people are going to like listening to it. Everybody we've played it for so far has really enjoyed it. So I hope people will go help us grow and climb up the charts by subscribing to it on Apple. Right now, actually, you can do it.
And the thing about it is, for a long, we've been working on this thing for a long time. I mean, too long. I mean, we've had interruptions. We don't do this full time. I don't do this full time, and so we have to do it when we can. But for the longest time, I was scared to death because, it seemed like it wasn't coming together. It seemed like there was always something to do. The sound wasn't right. In the last few weeks, it's like all of a sudden, I feel like this great relief has come over me because, I listened to it and I'm like, man, that sounds pretty good. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is just tell a good story about what happened here. And what happened here is amazing. It truly is amazing. And as you were talking about, John, everybody we talk to, we do have to acknowledge throughout that people's memories, including my own, are flawed, and we conflate things and we remember things the way we sort of want to. And so sorting through that is difficult, but it's also sort of a beautiful part of the process to just hear the people who are involved in their own perspectives of them. And, at the end of the day, we just want it to be a good story.
Yeah. I guess you learn a lot about how history comes together as you do something like this. You read all those things in your history books. Well, it was depending on people's memories and that sort of thing. I guess it's a sausage making experiment like everything else.
Yeah. What's that line we have? If history's well, I can't remember the line. Never. Sorry about that.
No, if reporting the first draft of history, it needs a hell of an editor. Is the line? But yeah, I think we try to demystify that process a little bit and take the listener inside of that and make it clear that Rudolph wrote down his version of this story. He has his whole manifesto, but he's a hell of an unreliable narrator. And if you go read his his manifesto, you'd think that he's the second coming of Chuck Norris and he could do all this stuff on his own, and maybe he did. But there's a lot of people who seem to have shaped him along the way, and half the people we spoke to are convinced he acted alone. The other half are convinced he had help, whether in East Tennessee or Western North Carolina, or as far away as Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And so it's interesting just to try to make sense of that. And we try to be honest and direct with the listeners about what we know and what we don't know, and what we have hunches about, I guess I'll put it that way.
Have y'all read his book?
I don't recommend it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's worth it. Yeah.
No, I mean, we tried to understand who this guy was, what made him tick, what he thinks made him tick, what other people think made him tick. It's interesting because he has become something of a influencer for extremists. There were people leading up to the Olympics last year in Paris that were saying online, they were using his name as a verb, saying that somebody needs to go do a Rudolph at the Olympics and things like that. And so he has managed, even from prison, to stay abreast of the movement that he is a part of.
Obviously, there's a lot of crazy there, but is he more crazy than radicalized, or the other way around? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, John, use your line. He may have been a, what was it, bomber in search of a target?
Yeah, I mean, my everybody says, what motivated him? What are the common threads? Abortion clinic, gay nightclub, and this is somebody who claims he's not, homophobic. He's got a gay brother who he cares about. He'd never really talked about abortion, and then the Olympics come on, and the question, and he blows that up, and it's what is the unifying factor there? Well, and I do think he's a bomber in search of a target, man. He's looking for an excuse, and I would also make the argument and do in the podcast that we can all be thankful that he's a pretty damn bad bomber too, because he was trying to kill a whole bunch of people. And he did injure a lot of them, and it was tragic. But, man, if not for some crazy breaks along the way, it would have been a lot worse. And we talk a lot about those breaks.
And, he clearly had violent tendencies, but he grew up in a strange family. At one point, his brother saws his own hand off with a table saw.
On video, which would have been huge on TikTok if it were today.
Right. His father died when he was young. His mother took the family basically from extremist Christian sect to extremist Christian sect. People who believe things like
across the political spectrum,
the true Israelites. Really. They're the one true chosen people of God. That Jews are the literal spawn of Satan. And so, it is a chicken or egg situation of like how much of this is shaping him. A lot of the father figures in his life were, anti-government extremists, and how much of it was just kind of unleashing what he already felt and wanted to do. But he was part of a movement, whether or not he claimed membership of the Army of God, and whether he was having help, and whether or not he truly believed what he said he believed, we kind of leave up to the listener to decide, but we try to lay out the facts as best we can.
Yeah.
Well, he was, even when he was really young, he was at least claimed to be, fiercely independent and not a good follower and that sort of thing. Called himself Adolf Rudolph and denied the Holocaust in high school and made explosives with friends. And he chose that path pretty early. But it's a fascinating story, man.
Yeah. Y'all have to listen. I have to listen to it. I can't wait.
And the cop and the arrest, man. Wait till you get the arrest is great. But Hammondtree won't let me give that stuff away.
Yeah, I know. He's cutting us off here. July 30th, we all get to find out the first 3 episodes of the 8-episode series of American Shrapnel will drop wherever everyone gets their podcasts. And I'll remind you here on Down in Alabama. So, you won't forget if you listen here. Guys, I appreciate y'all coming on, doing this.
Of course, thank you.
I appreciate the work that y'all do and to inform us and teach us a little history, and can't wait to see it. We'll get y'all back on here for after this thing's over.
It sounds great. Thanks, Ike.
Hey, thanks everybody for listening to us. We're going to be back on Monday. Till then, y'all come by and see what we're doing on the internet at al.com.